دكتور صمد، واضح السلايد؟
ايه، واضح
تمام.
واضح، شكرا.
اوكي، اهلا
شكرا.
وسهلا.
الله
اتفضل
يخليك.
دكتور، اهلا وسهلا.
تمام، شكرا، الله يخليك.
الله
السلام
يحفظك.
عليكم.
وعليكم
Thanks
السلام.
for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here today with you, with very great professors, and I'm proud to be here to present an important topic, which is it might be a forgotten natural resource we have in Iraq generally, because the care was not in the level of the natural resource fortune we had in Iraq. So thermal springs are natural sources of water that are warmer than the air around them. They are found where water comes up from the ground due to the heat from below the Earth's surface. And usually we have two types of thermal springs, warm spring and hot spring. And when we say warm and hot, before I explain them, it also depends on the weather condition of the place. Because, like, for example, what feels warm in Soleimani in my city might not feel same in Basra because of the weather condition. So usually, warm springs have water temperature between 21 to 36.7 degrees Celsius. The water comes from deep below the surface and is heated by the Earth's natural heat. It usually reaches the surface through a recharge source, as you can see it in the slide. There is a recharge source, and below it there is a storage reservoir and heat source. So, the water is then stored in the reservoir before it's discharged. So, but when it comes to the hot springs, the difference is it's just hotter than the warm. For example, it's hotter than 36.7 degrees Celsius. These springs are formed in a similar way, but of course, the water is much warmer. Like warm springs, hot springs are also supplied by water that has been heated deep inside the earth, and the water rises to the surface through a discharge point, as you see in the slide. So the main differences is the higher temperature of the water, as I said, and of course, it's also related to the geographical and the weather condition of the place. So both types of thermal springs can be used for bathing, for a lot of purposes like relaxation, and sometimes even for therapeutic purposes, because the heat and the minerals in the water could be very useful for the skin and for the health. So it also can be a great source for the economy of the country. Some hot springs can be found in areas that have active volcanoes, or where the Earth's crust is thin. The geologists are familiar with these terms more. It allows the heat to escape more easily. So thermal springs are created when heat from beneath the Earth's heat water and cause it to rise to the surface, forming either a warm or hot spring depending on the water temperature. So can you please go to the next slide? Yes. Mineral springs in Kurdistan region, as my colleague and my professor, Dr. Ramazan, just explained, we just have chosen some case studies that conducted in Kurdistan region of Iraq, but it could be generalized to the other places of Iraq, even other countries around us, other regions. Mineral springs in our region, in Kurdistan region, are found in mountains and valleys, like in some places, for example, we have Hamam Jalil, Halabja, and even Dukan. The water from these springs usually warm or even sometimes hot, and it contains many minerals like calcium, magnesium, sulfur, as the researchers have mentioned this in their papers that published. So these minerals make the water very special and good for health. People use the water from these springs for bathing because it's believed to have health benefit. Some people also drink the water. Even we have some companies that they just produce the spring water bottle for sale. That's why I said it's very important also for the economy of the country. The springs are very important to the natural beauty of Kurdistan, and I can say it's a part of our culture. It attracts tourists who visit to enjoy the water and these places. So, but there are some risks to these springs. As I said, We usually in Iraq, as my professor mentioned, the lack of awareness is one of the biggest problem we struggle of. We don't care about our natural resources. There are some risks for these springs. For example, the main one is pollution. Another one is overusing it. People, when visit these places, they pollute these natural resources. Overusing is another problem, not only for the springs, for the groundwater. As you know now, the groundwater in Iraq decreased a lot, the water level, water table level, because we extract water, we overuse water more than the aquifers that can naturally recharge itself. So another problem is lack of regular checks on the water quality. This can make the problem even worse because if we have a good monitoring system, once the water become polluted, and if we know in the early stage, the treatment process will be so simple and will be cheap. But if we don't care about it, of course, the solution will be very challenging later. Even it will be very cost effective. So it's important to protect these springs to make sure that they remain safe and clean for people to use it for now and even for the future. And proper monitoring and care are needed to keep these natural resources in good condition, not only for the authority, no, even for the community to raise the awareness through the education system. We have it. Yeah, next slide, Dr. Sosan. Here you can see in this chart, it's just the location for the springs. We have it in Dukan and in Hammam Jalil in Sulaimani to be shown. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. Mineral springs in Kurdistan comes from rock that are cracked, such as limestone, dolomite, and sandstone. These rocks allow the water to carry minerals like magnesium, like calcium. These minerals are good for health, as we said, and make the springs popular for tourism purposes. The same type of rocks that the mineral springs comes from might also be very good for storing heat for aquifer thermal energy storage, as Dr. Ramazan explained. It's important to test things like how the water moves, how deep the aquifer is, and how long it take to recharge itself. And if there is any pollution risk, we need to be aware before using it for aquifer thermal energy storage. So there might be some recommendation for the next step. For example, these studies are just, it will be a great image for us. It will be a clear image to go for the next steps for conducting more research. For example, we should create a map for all mineral springs and collect data on the water's chemistry and flow. We also need to do a lot of studies to check the depth, size, and even the rate of recharge of the aquifers that feed these springs. Also, it's important to test the aquifer thermal energy storage in a few pilot areas where there is enough water storage and the geology is safe. So promoting, the springs for health tourism, but of course, this is what I always want to mention, the local water needs should be considered before we use it for other purposes. Because, we have to make our society to feel that it's their own fortune, it's their own natural resource. So government should not use it for any other purposes until the community needs completely will be met. Next slide. Yeah, we have this is, yeah, as I said, we have some case studies we have reviewed under the supervision of my professor, Dr. Ramazan. This study is about spring water quality assessment using water quality index, and this conducted in some villages in Duhok city in Kurdistan region of Iraq. Based on this study, the author tested 10, spring water in 10 different villages in Duhok. And he collected the data in 2018, means 8 years ago. And the important point, he used the dry and wet seasons, both, to collect data, not only focusing on one specific season. So based on the finding, most water quality results were safe even for drinking. And as all of you know, when we say for drinking, it means it meets the highest standard because drinking has a direct impact on our health. So, but based on the study, it showed that, as I said, like most of the tested sample were excellent and even suitable for drinking, all except two sites, which is site 6 and site 8. If Dr. Susan can proceed to the next slide, I will show you here. Here you can see site 6 and site 8. So based on all of these, we have now 10 samples and in 10 different areas. 8 of them were, the quality were excellent and could be used for drinking immediately without any treatment, except these two sites, S6 and S8. And what this tell us, it tell us how the research is important, because without conducting research, without collecting samples and testing it, we will not know about the quality of these springs. So imagine if we don't know, so maybe people drink from these springs and will cause a lot of dangerous consequences to their health. Can Dr. Susan proceed to the next slide? Yeah, this is another case, is another study conducted by some researchers 2023, 3 years ago. They have applied different statistical models like linear logistic regression, like Shannon entropy, weight of evidence, and frequency rate ratio. So they have used these statistical models to assess the spring potential mapping in the multi-aquifer system in Kurdistan region of Iraq. They also conducted this study in Duhok. So both studies were conducted in the same city. It shows the importance of these natural resources in that area that could be invested somehow. We will talk about the investment recommendation later. So in this study, the authors have collected the samples from 450 springs. And the important point is that they did not only collect the data. No, they also considered a lot of factors. For example, the land use, the rainfall, the faults and the slope of the area, geological factors. And, based on their results, it showed that the logistic regression and weight of evidence, these two models were the most accurate and had the highest performance for the mapping process, and except the Shannon entropy, which was the weakest model, and it's not recommended to be used in these areas. But of course, when we say the weakest, there must be an important point I want to mention. I'm also, specialized in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning for water and environmental studies. So sometimes, for example, I use support vector machine or artificial neural network for prediction purposes for rainfall or any other hydrological parameter. Maybe sometimes it gets very bad, let's say, accuracy in some areas in Soleimani. But when I use it for, let's say, for Baghdad, it may achieve a higher performance. So when we say it's weakest, it might be weakest for this case study and for Duhok only. So it could be used for other places, but of course with testing. And if we see it has a high performance, then we can proceed with it. So based on the result, it helps the policymakers, it helps the governments to rely on these models and do not, because usually, in Iraq, our government, they seriously don't want to pay a lot of money for the water and environmental sector, unfortunately. So these studies will be helpful for them because they don't need to spend more money. The studies were conducted and we have the results, so we have a clear image to proceed within the sustainable water management plan. So it could be a very good guidance for the policymakers and authority in Iraq in the water and environmental sector to get benefit from these studies and to try to invest in these important natural resources as spring water. Next slide, Dr. Safsan, please. Yeah, this is the location site of the modeled springs, 450 springs in Duhok area, as you can see. So the authors have used 80% of the data for training the model. Then the rest, 20% will remain for the validation process. Can Dr. Sosan proceed to the next slide? This is just the flow chart. It's important for the professors and people that specialize in this field to see, the graphical work, or we can say the graphical abstract of the study. So we know that they have used these four models and they considered these factors, topography related factors, geology related factors, hydrological related factors, even the land use and the slope. Then they have dedicated 80% of the collected data for the training process, and the remaining 20% were for validation. Can you proceed to the final slide, Dr. Sausan? Yes. Yeah. So we just explained two studies conducted related to natural springs. We had it in Duhok City in Kurdistan region of Iraq. So based on these studies, of course, there are some other studies and more studies should be conducted. We should not only rely on very like little studies to go for the investment process, especially in the governmental level. But based on the finding of these studies that we just shortly explained, it could be mentioned that scientific maps can help find the best place to discover new springs because we just found a lot of spring in this area. Of course, we have a lot of other springs in other areas of Iraq. So we need to go with a scientific map model to find and discover these springs. So these maps show the areas that are safe to use and have high potential for water resources. The water from these springs could be used for many purposes, just like we said. For example, the bottled water industry, and even for spa tourism and other purposes. So investing in these mineral springs could also create new jobs for local people. Nowadays it helps the government to decrease pressure of the community on them because, for example, if we talk about our region, lack of employment is one of the biggest issue we have. A lot of young people graduate from universities, and there is no employment, governmental employment for them, and they rarely can find job like somewhere else. So investing in these springs will create a lot of opportunity for young professionals and young graduates, so which will also help the national, let's say, peace in our country. And the main the main point of the investment is to make sure that the water is used in a way that is safe and sustainable, because we lack sustainability in Iraq generally, which creates a lot of problem for us. We currently have problem in terms of water, but it creates a lot of problem in the future if we do not start within a good step for achieving sustainability. So this will help to protect the natural water resources while allowing them to be used for the growth of the economy in our country. And this investment can benefit the community, economy, and environment in general in the long run, as I said. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry to take longer. I hope I could deliver some important points related to natural springs. Thank you so much.
بارك الله بك دكتور سرمد وعلى هذه المحاضرة المهمة المتميزة. نشكرك ونشكر حضرتك ونشكر دكتور رمضان أيضا على ما قدم من معلومات متميزة حقيقة. الآن باب المداخلات مفتوح. دكتور رمزي أعطيتك الصلاحية، أهلا وسهلا.
دكتور شوف دكتور سرمد إذا عنده ملاحظة على
شكرا.
عندي بالانجليزي وبالعربي سويتها، اخذت احتياط. نعم. وما ادري دكتور سرمد يعني
خلي دكتور سرمد هم من
شكرا يا دكتور. Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I think Dr. Rafi mentioned a very important point, which is lack of practical implementation. This is our problem in Iraq. There is a huge gap between researchers, university professors, and policymakers. So we can clearly say that There is a gap between science and policy. Scientists have a lot of knowledge and ideas that could help improve the country, especially in the areas like energy, water security, environmental protection, and even sustainable development. But this knowledge is usually not used in the decisions made by the government. This gap means that while Iraq has many resources and potential, but it struggled with turning the ideas into action. The lack of practical implementation of scientific research in policymaking is a key issue that prevent Iraq from reaching its full potential despite its wealth. Iraq is a very rich country in natural resources, but we cannot see the practical implementation. As my colleague, Dr. Ramazan said that we just visited Turkey last October, and we visited the sites for the geothermal energy storage. So it's not something impossible. It's easy to be implemented, but the problem is lack of vision by policymakers, what we call in Arabic, I think, رؤية سياسيين لتطور البلد. شكرا.
You are right. And you are fully right. Yes, we have to make some, research. I'm sorry,
Thank you so much for Dr. Ramadan and for Dr. Ayman. Actually, Dr. Ayman mentioned a very important point. Of course, many studies showed that when geothermal energy is invested, it affected the quality of groundwater. Because when water is pumped from deep wells, it may contain minerals like salt, like sulfur, and even metals. So these minerals can mix into the groundwater if they are not treated properly. In some cases, like gases like hydrogen sulfide can also be released. So if these chemicals get into nearby groundwater, they can make the water unsafe to drink and even harm the plants and animals and generally the ecosystem. So to prevent this, geothermal plants must have systems to control and clean the water before it's released. This helps keep the environment safe and even protect the quality of groundwater. So if done right, geothermal energy could be a very clean energy source, but of course, careful planning and monitoring are needed to avoid any negative effect and impact on the quality of groundwater. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
شكرا دكتور سرمد، شكرا دكتور أيمن على مداخلتك، وسلامي لدكتور نصر ولكل الاستشاريين في منظمة أكساد. أهلا وسهلا.
يصل بإذن الله.
دكتور هلال على مداخلتك، ونشكر دكتور رمضان. بارك الله فيك. دكتور سرمد، في سؤال من دكتور كريم فتاح. What are the most important opportunities to apply such a program in Kurdistan region or Iraq, and at which area available too?
Thank you so much for important question. As I explained in my presentation, me, under the supervision of my professor, Dr. Ramazan, we have conducted a review study based on some research conducted in Kurdistan region of Iraq, and we just summarized two studies conducted in Duhok. But of course, as I said, this is just the preliminary finding. This is the beginning step for conducting more research, because without conducting more research, without collecting reliable data, and we cannot proceed with the implementation. But again, I'm saying that the main problem is within the vision of the government. We lack the vision for having sustainable future. We just, in Iraq, we just love to focus on the short-term plan and short-term project, which will not going to solve our problems, because, the more we become careless about the future, the more troubles we get it, because, we have a lot of issues in Iraq in terms of, let's say, water. Even we are rich, it's a Mesopotamia, land between rivers Tigris and Euphrates. But as I said, this is a clear image for the government. So they know that in Duhok, for example, in some other areas, there are springs, there are minerals, there are a lot of natural resources, which could be very useful for the investment process. So this is our responsibility to conduct study and to show the image to the policymakers. But when it comes to the implementation, we are not in the position of decision making. That's why I said there is a huge gap between science and policy. If they want to conduct, if they want to, let's say, connect this research to the practical way, so they can easily do it with the cooperation of university professors. Thank you so much.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور، الله يبارك فيك على هذه الإجابة الوافية. دكتور رمضان أيضا يقول: دكتور كريم، هل هناك تعاون دولي في هذا المجال؟
دكتورتنا، بالنسبة للدكتور كريم سؤاله وجيه، بس ماكو يعني بالعراق رغبة للاستثمار. في الدول كلها تشتغل، يعني جبنا أمثلة على تركيا، لأن احنا زرنا كان 10 أيام، أكثر من 10 أيام. فالتوجه الدولي هو أنه الحكومة تعلن هاي المواقع اللي أشار عليه الدكتور سرمد وهاني أنه موجودة، فيجون هم المفروض يعني ينطوا صلاحية للمحافظين. المحافظ يعني يطلب من الشركات المستثمرة بهذا التخصص زيارة تجي مواقع، اطلاع على البحوث، وبعدين دراسة مثل ما تفضل أستاذ أيمن، دراسة الأثر البيئي والجدوى الاقتصادية. وعلى بركة الله والانسترومنت دكتور رمزي ودكتور عبد الجليل مو صعبة، يعني مو يعني شفت شيء إنه تقنية ما نقدر نجيب، كلها أنابيب ومضخات ويعني الأكسسوارز مالتها. فالتعاون الدولي يبقى على مدى رغبة الحكومة في البدء بالاستثمار بهذا الجانب الحيوي. جزيل الشكر الدكتور كريم.
بارك الله فيك.
Thank you
أيضا
so much. Just one thing to be added, Dr. Sosan. Thank you. Regarding this question, هل توجد تعاون دولي في هذا المجال لتطبيقات مبتكرة في الإقليم والعراق? As Professor Mazan mentioned, in Turkey, we were there for 10 days. And once we presented our topics and studies, some companies came and they took our number, they conducted webinar with us, and they asked us to help them to come to Kurdistan region of Iraq and to make investment, because they have more than 25 years experience in geothermal energy plants. But the problem, as Prof. Ramazan said, it completely depends on the vision and the program and the plan of the government. Thank you. So there is the international collaboration and cooperation, but it completely depends on the government. Thank you.
Exactly.
بارك الله بك دكتور، الله يحفظك. عندنا في